I didn't go for a walk that morning to clear my head. I went to try and forget that I had one. It was mid-October in northern Oregon, and the kind of cold that doesn't quite hit you until you stop moving. The air smelled like wet cedar and fireplace smoke. Every sidewalk glistened with a thin layer of dew, catching the morning light like 1,000 little mirrors. People were still asleep behind their drawn curtains, the whole town hushed, except for the steady crunch of my sneakers on damp leaves and the occasional distant hum of a delivery truck. I walked that route every day since I moved back in with my dad. My feet memorized the path long before my heart did, past the bakery with the flaking "Help Wanted" sign, the community bulletin board with yellowing posters from summer, and then onto Birch Lane, where the houses started getting older and the fences a little more tired. I didn't want to be here. That's the truth. I didn't come home because I missed anyone or because I thought it would heal me. I came because I had nowhere else to go. 3 months earlier, I had left everything behind. My job, my apartment, and most notably, the life I'd built with Lily, which unraveled faster than either of us expected after we lost the baby. And lost never felt like the right word. You lose your keys. You misplace your phone. This was different. This was a kind of loss that sat inside my chest like a cinder block I couldn't shake, one that made every other part of my life feel suddenly pointless. So I came back. 32 years old, single, heartbroken, jobless, and sleeping in the room I painted blue when I was 12. My dad had converted it into a storage room after Mom passed, and he didn't ask questions when I asked if I could stay. Just nodded, pushed a few boxes aside, and bought a second-hand twin mattress off Craigslist. It was on the third morning, when the fog still sat low across the street like spilled milk, that I first saw the cat. He was sitting on the wooden fence at the end of Birch Lane, right where the sidewalk curved toward a cul-de-sac. A patchy-looking gray tabby with one ragged ear and a long, curling tail. He didn't move when I approached, just stared. I nodded at him, mostly out of habit. "Morning," I said softly. No meow, no movement, just a blink, slow, deliberate, like he was acknowledging me. I thought nothing of it, but the next morning, he was there again. Same spot, same stare. And when I passed him, I swear I heard the softest rustle behind me, looked back, and saw him trailing behind me. Not close enough to touch, not far enough to ignore. I slowed. He slowed. I sped up. So did he. A strange kind of companionship. By the time I turned toward my dad's street again, the cat stopped at the edge of Birch Lane, sat down, and began grooming his paw like nothing had happened. I chuckled, shook my head, and went on with my day. But a part of me, a part I hadn't listened to in a while, felt just the tiniest bit less alone. By day 5, it wasn't just a coincidence. He was waiting for me, like clockwork. He followed me all the way down Birch Lane, past the bakery, even waited outside the corner store while I ducked in for coffee. The teenage cashier with a nose ring and poet tattoo on her forearm said, "Hey, your cat's out there," when I paid. I told her it wasn't mine. She squinted. "He acts like he is." I didn't know what to make of it. I hadn't fed him. I hadn't touched him. We didn't even share a sidewalk. But somehow, his quiet little presence was becoming a part of my morning, like a ritual I didn't know I needed. I told my dad about it one night over microwaved lasagna. He was watching Jeopardy with the volume way too loud and half listening, like always. "A cat, huh?" he said, Might be a stray, or just likes your face. Funny, I muttered, stabbing at my food. Animals know things, he added after a beat. They pick people. You think you're picking them, but nah, they decide. The 6th morning, I brought a small piece of leftover chicken in my pocket. I don't know why I did it. It wasn't a decision I thought about. It just felt right, like an offering, like a thank you. I waited until we reached the same stretch of road near the bakery, then crouched slightly and held it out in my palm. Here, I said. If you're gonna stalk me, you might as well get something out of it. He stood still at first, ears flicking forward. Then he padded forward slowly, cautiously, like he didn't want to startle me. He took the chicken gently, no claws, no noise, just a brush of tongue and warmth. Then, and I still don't know why this part hit me the hardest, he looked up at me and rubbed the side of his face against my shin. Just once. And then he sat down and started grooming himself like the moment hadn't mattered at all. But it did. It mattered to me because it had been months since anything had touched me without pity, without the weight of condolences, without hesitation. This cat didn't know my story. He didn't ask questions. He didn't flinch. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the feeling of his fur against my jeans, the way he looked at me like he saw me. Not the broken version, not the husk, but just me. And for the first time in a long time, I let the tears come. Not the loud, dramatic kind, just the quiet kind that slip down your face before you even realize you're crying. The 7th morning, I didn't walk to forget anything. I walked because I hoped he'd be there. And he was. Same fence, same stare. But that day, something changed. Instead of waiting for me to pass and falling in step behind me, he jumped down from the fence before I reached him and padded off in the opposite direction. Then he stopped, looked back, waited. I stood there, confused. "Where are you going?" I asked. My voice sounded small, even to me. He flicked his tail, then turned again, taking a few more steps down a narrow alley I'd never paid attention to before. He looked back again, waiting. This wasn't routine. This wasn't coincidence. Something I couldn't explain, told me to follow. So I did. And that's where everything started. The alley was narrow, the kind of space you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. Damp gravel underfoot, brick walls on either side, streaked with moss and the faded ghosts of graffiti. A busted-down chain-link fence leaned crooked at the far end, partially swallowed by ivy. I hesitated a few steps in. The tabby didn't. He moved like he'd been here 1,000 times. I followed slowly, my breath visible in the cool morning air. It smelled of old rain, rust, and distant cinnamon, probably from the bakery just around the block. The alley turned left sharply, then opened up into something unexpected. A vacant lot. Not empty, not really, but quiet, forgotten. The skeleton of a greenhouse stood at one end, its glass long shattered, just a rusting metal frame now tangled with weeds. A single picnic bench leaned on one leg beneath a gnarled tree that had no business growing that tall in this kind of soil. It was oddly peaceful, like a secret pocket of the town that hadn't been touched in years. The cat, I hadn't named him, not yet, padded toward a crumbling stone ledge and leapt onto it with ease. He sat there, back straight, tail curled around his feet, watching me, like he was waiting for me to understand something. I sat down slowly on the picnic bench. It creaked under my weight but held. I didn't speak. I just sat, The wind moved gently through the leaves above us. I listened, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to be anywhere else. That became our new rhythm. Every morning, I'd wake up, pull on a hoodie, stuff a small snack in my pocket, and meet him at the fence on Birch Lane. And each morning, instead of following me, he'd lead me, always back to that quiet lot. I started bringing coffee in a thermos and a book I barely read. I'd sit at the bench. He'd patrol the edges, hop onto the greenhouse frame, stalk invisible prey in the weeds. He never came close, not at first, but I watched him. I learned the way his left ear twitched when he was annoyed, how he'd puff his tail up slightly before jumping, how he let out a soft chirping sound whenever a bird landed somewhere he couldn't reach. Not a meow, a chirp, like he was trying to speak their language. On the fourth morning at the lot, I brought him tuna. Not the cheap stuff, actual albacore packed in water. I laid it out on a flat rock near the greenhouse and took a few steps back. He eyed it warily, then looked at me. A pause. Then he crept forward and ate, slowly, never turning his back to me. That same day, he let me sit closer. Not next to him, not yet, but closer than before, maybe 5 feet away. I didn't push it. That afternoon, I told my dad about the lot, about the cat leading me there. He looked up from his crossword. Sounds like he's showing you his place. His place? Dad shrugged. They all have one. Territory. Safe spots. If he's showing you that, he trusts you. It was a strange word. Trust. Not something I'd thought much about lately. Not since everything with Lily fell apart. We'd been together 6 years. She was my anchor, my mirror, my future. We'd talked about names before we even started trying. She liked old names. Nora, Samuel, June. I liked ones that didn't remind me of anyone I'd already known. Our first pregnancy happened fast, almost too fast. I was scared, but excited. Until the ultrasound. Until the nurse went quiet. Until the room felt colder than it should have. I remember the way Lily looked at me in that moment. Not panicked, just broken. And I didn't know how to hold her. I didn't know how to be for her. I thought I did, but I didn't. That was the beginning of the unraveling. We tried therapy, we tried space, but we started living around each other, like roommates wearing masks. She grieved openly. I grieved by shutting down. We became people we didn't recognize. She left one morning while I was at work. Left a note that said, "I love you, but I can't be in this house anymore." I didn't blame her. I just packed what I had left and came back home. The cat, I started calling him Pockets because of how he always seemed to tuck himself into corners and shadows, began to open up. Not dramatically, just enough. One morning, he brushed against my calf without looking at me. Another, he followed me around the lot as I walked in circles, meandering, thinking. I started talking to him, just softly, nothing profound. I'd narrate my thoughts, vent about my dad's habit of clipping soup coupons and leaving them all over the counter, or complain about my old coworkers' curated Instagram lives. He'd listen, or at least he wouldn't walk away, which, at that point, felt the same. One morning, I bent down, slowly, and extended my hand. He sniffed it, rubbed once, then leapt up into the greenhouse frame and disappeared into the vines. I smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. The next week brought rain. Not the nice kind, the sideways, bone-soaking, November's coming kind. I didn't walk that day. I stayed in bed and watched the ceiling. My dad made pancakes, which tasted like cardboard, but were a kind gesture. The second day of rain, I caved. I pulled on boots and a jacket and walked the path, umbrella in hand. Birch Lane was deserted, no cat. But something pulled me forward anyway, through the alley, into the lot. He was there, soaked, miserable, perched under the broken ledge of the old greenhouse. His fur was matted down, and his one good ear flicked irritably, but he was there, waiting. I ran back home, grabbed an old towel and some of my dad's leftover chicken from the fridge, and returned, out of breath, 20 minutes later. I crouched down near him, held the towel out. "Hey, buddy, didn't expect you today." He didn't come closer, but he didn't run either. I laid the towel down gently near the ledge, placed the chicken on it, and sat in the mud, my umbrella useless now. He crept forward, inch by inch, and curled onto the towel like it was made of velvet. He didn't eat right away, just rested his head on his paws and let out a breath I swear sounded like relief. And that was the first time he let me touch him. A slow, careful stroke down his damp back. His body tensed, then relaxed. His eyes closed. I don't know what it was. Maybe the rain, maybe the silence. But something in me cracked open. I whispered to him, voice trembling. I didn't know if I was still capable of being someone's safe place. His ear twitched. I wiped my eyes with the sleeve of my coat. He stretched, repositioned, and placed one paw, muddy and small, on my shoe, like an answer. From then on, he started meeting me halfway. He'd show up on my dad's porch in the morning, or wind between my legs as I locked the door. He stopped leading me to the lot every day. Sometimes he just wanted to walk with me. Sometimes we still went. Sometimes we just sat on the porch together. My dad started referring to him as your cat, and I stopped correcting him. I bought actual cat food, wet and dry, stainless steel bowls. I left one under the porch awning and watched Pockets eat, his tail curling around the post, like he belonged there. Because, in a way, he did. One evening, clear and cold, the sky a watercolor of pink and ash, I sat on the porch with Pockets curled in my lap. He was purring. I could feel it vibrate against my thighs, a soft, steady rhythm that seemed to calm something in my bones. I looked at him and said, "You know I'm not staying forever, right?" He didn't open his eyes, just pressed his head further into my palm. I don't know what I'm doing or where I'm going, but I feel like maybe I could be okay again, someday. The purring didn't stop. If anything, it deepened. And in that moment, I realized something. It wasn't about rescuing a cat. It never was. It was about being seen when I felt invisible, followed when I had no direction, trusted when I didn't trust myself. It was the third Sunday in November when everything shifted. The air had turned brittle, the kind of cold that felt like it could snap your fingers if you held them out too long. Most of the leaves were down, scattered in crusted piles at the edges of sidewalks, damp and curling like old pages. I remember noticing how quiet the town felt that morning. Quieter than usual. Even the crows weren't making noise. Pockets hadn't shown up at the porch. At first, I wasn't worried. He'd skipped a morning here and there, probably off handling whatever business outdoor cats attend to. But something about the silence felt heavier this time. Still, I went on my walk, checked his usual spots, and returned with the thermos half full. By the afternoon, I felt it in my chest. That small, almost imperceptible panic that comes from having something to lose again. I hadn't realized how much space he'd taken up in my life until he wasn't in it. By evening, I was out searching. I told myself it was just to be sure, that he'd show up at dawn with a burr in his fur and a meow like nothing had happened. But deep down, a different voice whispered, "You've already lost enough." I checked the alley, the lot, the ledge he liked, the picnic table. I called softly into the fading light, voice cracking from the cold and from fear I didn't want to name. Nothing. Just the rustle of dry grass and the occasional whistle of wind between buildings. The next morning, I woke early, earlier than usual. Sky still navy blue, air sharp, still no pockets. But this time, I noticed something different. At the base of the fence where he'd usually perch, the soil looked disturbed. Not freshly dug, but like something, or someone, had moved through. There were small, narrow paw prints, but they weren't going in our usual direction. They were leading away, toward the west end of town, the part I never walked to, the part with boarded-up shops and sagging roofs, where the pavement buckled and the paint peeled off street signs. The part of town I avoided, not because it was dangerous, but because it reminded me too much of myself. Neglected, quiet, full of stories that had been left behind. I stood there, heart in my throat, staring at those faint prints in the cold morning dirt. And then I made a choice. I followed them. I hadn't been to that side of town since I was a kid. Back then, it still had life. A laundromat, a corner deli, a tiny bookstore with a creaky screen door, and a cashier who always smelled like pipe smoke. But time had taken its toll. Now it was mostly empty buildings with papered windows and for lease signs bleached by sun. I walked past the old auto repair shop, the rusted metal sign swinging in the wind, past the shuttered hardware store where I bought my first hammer when I was 17. And then I saw it. Pockets. He was standing in the middle of the cracked sidewalk, tail low, body still. He looked thinner, wetter, tense. I froze. "Hey!" I called, barely above a whisper. His ears twitched, but he didn't move. Then, without warning, he turned and darted down a narrow passage between two buildings. I ran after him. My shoes skidded slightly on the wet concrete. The passage opened up into a backlot behind what used to be a thrift store. It was fenced in on 3 sides, overgrown and quiet. And in the corner, almost invisible behind a stack of rotting pallets, was a small opening beneath a collapsed piece of siding. And from that hole, I heard something I hadn't expected, a meow. But not pockets, smaller, weaker. I moved closer, crouched low, heart hammering. There, nestled into a crude makeshift den, barely sheltered from the wind, were 3 tiny kittens, eyes still closed, one of them squirming, the others eerily still. The smallest one let out another fragile mew, then curled tighter against the other 2. And just beside them, pressed against the cold wall, lay a tabby. But not pockets. She was much smaller, thin to the point of boniness, her ribs visible through her fur, which was damp and dirty. Her head lifted weakly at the sound of my footsteps, but she didn't rise. I knelt, stunned. Pockets reappeared behind me. He circled once, then stepped lightly into the space beside the kittens. Not touching them, just near, watching. That's when I understood. They weren't his, but they were his responsibility. I didn't move for a while, just watched, listened, breathed. Then I stood, pulled off my hoodie, and gently folded it, creating a warmer barrier near the kittens. I didn't try to pick them up. I wasn't even sure if I should. I laid the hoodie down and stepped back, giving them space. Pockets looked up at me, eyes still and deep. It hit me then. All those mornings he'd led me to the lot. All those times he kept his distance. The days he didn't eat the food right away. He'd been saving it, or watching out for them, or both. He hadn't just chosen me for company. He was making sure someone would still come when he couldn't. I called a local shelter that afternoon. Not the big city one, the smaller rescue 10 miles out. The one my mom used to volunteer at years ago. I remembered their number. I remembered the name of the woman who ran it, Joni. She answered on the second ring. I told her what I'd found. She didn't ask for proof. Just gave me calm instructions. Keep them warm. Don't move the mother unless absolutely necessary. If she's alive but weak, food and shelter might make the difference. I went home, gathered what I could: blankets, a shallow cardboard box, clean towels, a flashlight. My dad didn't ask questions. He just handed me his old thermos full of warm broth and said, "Wrap it in a sock. It'll keep them warm till you get them help." By the time I returned, the mother cat hadn't moved. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Pocket sat guard beside her. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed in that lot, flashlight flickering, hoodie wrapped around the kittens, a quiet sense of awe and dread sitting heavy on my chest. I talked to Pockets under my breath, told him he did good, told him I was sorry he had to do it alone for so long. At dawn, Joni arrived in her old Subaru with blankets, a carrier, and hands that moved with practiced kindness. She examined the kittens, checked the mother, then looked up at me. "She's not doing great," she said gently, "but she's not gone yet. You found them just in time?" Pocket stood to the side, tail wrapped around his paws, watching every movement. "You said he brought you here?" Joni asked. I nodded. She looked at him, then at me, then back at the mother and kittens. "Some cats, they just know who to trust," she said, "even when they've been let down 100 times. That day, I followed Joni back to the rescue to check in later. The kittens were placed in a heated incubator. The mother, named Bella on her intake form, was given fluids and soft food. She ate a little, not much, but enough. Pockets stayed behind. I offered to take him with me. He didn't come. The next morning, he was back on the porch. It wasn't the ending I thought I was walking toward. It was something better. A story not about being rescued, but about being needed. A story about trust not freely given, but earned, slowly, quietly, one morning at a time. Pockets never asked for anything. He didn't cry at my window or scratch at my door. He simply showed up until I was ready to do the same. The mornings after that first rescue blurred together in a way I still can't quite explain. It felt like time folded in on itself, each day both the same and completely new. The cold November air softened gradually, the sharp edge of fall given way to a gentler, quieter winter. And through it all, Pockets remained constant, a quiet sentinel on my porch, a shadow at my feet. But the biggest change was inside me. It was the day after Joni took Bella and the kittens to the rescue that I first realized how much Pockets had changed me. I was sitting on the porch steps, bundled in a thick sweater, the aroma of wet leaves and damp earth lingering around me. I held a mug of tea with both hands, watching the morning sun crack slowly over the rooftops. Pockets appeared quietly from under the porch, stretching his legs and arching his back like a cat who just finished a long nap. He moved toward me slowly, his eyes fixed on mine with an intensity I hadn't noticed before. as if he was studying not just my face, but my soul. He climbed into my lap, the warmth of his body melting into mine. And then, in a moment so simple it almost felt like a dream, he rested his head on my knee. I stroked his fur, rough and still a little ragged, and something inside me broke open, not in sadness, but in a kind of relief. A quiet release of all the tension I'd been holding. I thought about the mother cat, Bella, her fragility, her strength, how she'd carried those tiny lives through nights colder than any I'd ever known. And I thought about myself, about the last year, about the losses that had carved out empty spaces I wasn't sure could ever be filled. The truth was, before Pockets, I had been walking through life in a kind of fog. My mother's passing had left a hollow in our house and in my heart, so vast it swallowed everything else. I had tried to fill it with work, with distractions, with silent apologies whispered to empty rooms. But none of it reached the places that hurt. Then Pockets appeared, first a mystery, then a presence, then a lifeline. Over the next few days, I visited the rescue center often. Bella was improving slowly, her eyes brighter, her fur less matted. The kittens were thriving, already beginning to open their eyes, their tiny paws reaching out for the warmth of her body. Joni said they were lucky. Most mother cats in Bella's condition didn't make it. When I held one of the kittens, a soft gray tabby with faint stripes, the weight of its tiny body in my palm felt like the most precious thing in the world. Joni smiled at me, eyes warm and knowing. "You're a natural," she said. "Cats don't choose just anyone. They pick the people who need them as much as they need help." One afternoon, walking home, I noticed something new in Pockets. He was more confident now, less cautious. His tail curved high, his movements fluid and deliberate. He greeted neighbors with a slow blink or a gentle rub against their legs. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was living. And somehow, I was too. Then came the moment I wasn't prepared for. It was a chilly evening, the kind where the street lamps throw pools of orange light onto slick sidewalks. I was closing my front door when I heard a faint scratching at the window. Pockets was there, but not alone. Behind him, barely visible in the dim light, stood Bella. I froze. The mother cat had escaped. For a moment, we just stared at each other through the glass. Bella's eyes were wide and scared, her body thin but determined. I opened the door slowly, and she slipped inside without hesitation. Pockets followed her, tail flicking nervously. I crouched down, heart pounding. Bella didn't run or hide. She simply settled on the floor near the radiator, curling into a tight ball. Her breathing was uneven, and I knew she wasn't well. Not yet. That night, I stayed up with her. I sat on the floor, wrapping a soft blanket around both cats, whispering words I hoped would reach the places she'd been hurt. Pockets leaned against me, purring quietly. Bella's eyes closed, and for the first time since that cold night in the lot, I felt hope. Over the following weeks, Bella began to heal. She ate small meals, gained weight, and started to explore the house with cautious curiosity. Pockets became her protector and companion. They slept together on the windowsill, noses touching, silent communication passing between them. I watched them with a new understanding. This wasn't just about saving a cat. It was about being saved. One evening, I found Bella sitting on my mother's old armchair, the one I'd left untouched since the funeral. She looked at me with quiet acceptance, then stretched and settled into the cushion. It felt like a gift, a sign that even in loss, new life could find a place. The bond between us grew deeper with each passing day. Pockets, once astray with no past, became a symbol of resilience. Bella, the fragile mother, showed me the strength in vulnerability. And me, I learned to open my heart again. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch with Pockets curled in my lap, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. The fear, the uncertainty, the quiet moments of trust building. And I realized that sometimes the most unbelievable things happen not in grand gestures, but in the simple act of being there for each other. In the end, Pockets didn't just follow me to save the kittens. He led me back to myself. I still remember the day Pockets followed me for the first time. It was a late October afternoon, wind biting through the turning leaves. I hadn't planned on making any connections that day, least of all with a scruffy, silent cat with deep amber eyes. But somehow, over the course of a week, that one small act of curiosity from a stray cat became the thread that unraveled years of loneliness, grief, and silent desperation I hadn't dared to admit I was carrying. Looking back now, it feels like he wasn't just following me through the streets. He was following me out of the darkness. The small apartment where I live has slowly changed since those early days. Pockets and Bella have claimed every corner with soft fur, gentle purrs, and the occasional burst of kitten energy from the growing little ones Joni named Echo, Maple, and Jasper. I've never been one for pets before this. I was always the person who said, "I don't have time," or "I'm not ready." But these cats, their lives intertwined with mine now, have taught me that readiness isn't a precondition for love. Sometimes love is the readiness. One winter morning, I found myself sitting by the window, watching snowflakes drift lazily to the ground. Pockets was perched on the sill, staring out with the same inscrutable expression he had the day I first saw him. Bella stretched out beside me, her fur warm against my sweater. And I thought about all that had happened, about the week he followed me, every day, silent but persistent, leading me here, to a cold lot, a forgotten corner of town, and a family I didn't know I was meant to save. The truth is, that week changed everything. I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to feel before, that loss is not a place where you stay forever. It's a passage, sometimes jagged, sometimes slow, but always leading somewhere new. Pockets didn't just follow me because he was lost or hungry. He followed me because he needed a chance. And so did I. Since then, life has been anything but simple. There were nights when Bella's breathing grew shallow again, and I thought she might slip away. Times when the kittens got sick, and the vet bills piled up. Moments of exhaustion when all I wanted was to give up. But through it all, there was that quiet, steady presence. The soft pad of paws on hardwood floors. The warm weight of a cat curled into my lap after a long day. The gentle reminder that healing doesn't happen in leaps, but in the small acts of showing up, day after day. Sometimes I catch myself watching Pockets and Bella interact. The way they communicate without words. The way Pockets gently nudges her or follows her around like a shadow. It's a kind of loyalty that's raw and unspoken, built on trust and shared survival. They remind me that love can be both fierce and tender. In many ways, I think that's what saved me. Not just the cats, but what they represent. The chance to care for someone other than myself. To be needed, to be trusted, to be chosen. I used to believe I was broken beyond repair. That grief was a prison with no key. But Pockets showed me otherwise. By following me, by leading me to Bella and her kittens, he gave me a new purpose, a new beginning. There's a quiet power in that, in the way animals don't ask for perfection. They ask only for presence. They accept us when we're messy, scarred, incomplete. And somehow, in giving that acceptance, they teach us to accept ourselves. Sometimes people ask me why I didn't just adopt Pockets the first day I met him, why I waited. But I think the waiting was part of the story, part of what made the bond so deep and real. We needed to find each other in our own time. Now, when I open my front door in the morning, Pockets is there, waiting like a gentle guardian of our little world. Bella is nearby, always, and the kittens, now old enough to tumble through the rooms with reckless joy, are proof that hope, no matter how fragile, can grow. The house smells like dry leaves and warm wool in autumn. The windows catch the afternoon sun just right, and somewhere in the quiet, I hear the softest purrs. I often think about the phrase I heard Joni say the day I called her. Cats don't choose just anyone. They pick the people who need them as much as they need help. It's true. Pockets needed me, but I needed him more. And in that mutual need, we found something extraordinary. Sometimes healing arrives not with a bang, but with a paw print on your heart, a silent stare that says, "I'm here," a gentle brush against your hand when the world feels too big. And sometimes the most unbelievable things happen because someone or something decides to follow you when you think you're alone, when you think you've lost everything. That's when a stray cat can lead you home. Because home isn't a place, it's a feeling, a connection, a quiet promise that no matter how far you wander, no matter how lost you feel, you will always find your way back. And sometimes that promise comes on 4 paws and a soft purr.